think people realized at that time that the band needed to have some time off and recollect and to heal themselves from this ride that they, were on for the last 15 years.
We couldn't get back to the same pace, to the same rhythm at the one they were kind of having in the late 80s or early 90s. It would not have been right.
The good thing is always, especially from Daniel, is to not put too much pressure, especially on Martin writing songs.
At the very beginning of things, Martin was having quite a lot of trouble writing. I think he had a bit of writer's block.
He'd come to a point where he had his first block and he didn't like it. That's pressure there in itself, I think. Suddenly thinking, can I write another good song again?
I think we were just like painfully aware of it, and Martin too. I think he was just, bored of the whole process. We are the dead of night. We're in the zombie room. We're twilight.
I don't think he particularly likes songwriting that much, and he doesn't write that many songs.
I do think Martin puts a lot of pressure on himself when he writes. Yeah, so I've seen him go through the pressure, yeah. I think Martin comes up with songs in his head a lot sooner than he puts them onto paper.
And I think when he gets his head into shape, i.e. he knows that we're going in the studio to do an album, I think he then starts working at it.
The longer you go on and the more songs you write, I think the harder it gets to keep a level of interest there. And quite a few months went by and I just hadn't written anything.
At that point, we suggested maybe he should get somebody in as a sort of, not as a writing partner really, but somebody in to be around, to have some company really, a musician who could like do bits and pieces for him while he was writing.
So Daniel suggested that I get in Gareth Jones and one of my friends, Paul Freegard, to help on the pre-production.
For me, he's a very natural musical guy, like a little magical musical spirit kind of person. The musical light shining through him, But somehow the door had got shut and the musical light wasn't flowing through him, and that was making him more depressed.
Well, I came down one weekend and he played me I Feel Loved, and he was stuck on it. And we had a little session here, just, friends, and we progressed with it. And then he started playing me some other stuff on guitar and on piano. And it was interesting for him to suddenly open up and just start playing, songs that he hadn't finished, because he hadn't done that before. And I just thought, this is going to be fun.
He keeps his cards very close to his chest. You never hear anything unless he's absolutely 100% happy about it. So who knows what great songs have been rejected that none of us have ever heard.
As soon as he started doing it, then it seemed to kind of open the floodgates, and he was, I've got this new lyric, I've got this, so I want to change that, what do you reckon of that? It was really inspiring for me to watch a really talented person suddenly start working. I could see his brain going.
Open your eyes. Somehow, just by having them there, really motivated me, because I realised otherwise there's like three of us sitting in a studio doing nothing.
It naturally evolved from being a songwriting process to a pre-production process. They kind of missed out the demo stage in a sense. Martin would normally make some demos, and then there would be like a pre-production stage and then develop from there. But the stage that they were at was quite advanced. And in some of the cases, didn't change all that much by the time the record was finished.
I didn't take it very seriously at the start, because we were friends. It was just trying to get him writing again and get him in a routine. And then Dave came down to do some vocals. But, oh, actually, it's Depeche Mode, isn't it? It's not Martin, it's Depeche.
I was blind and I saw the lights. My angel coming in a brilliant white.
That was quite an exciting moment when Dave came down. He nearly actually turned away. It was too much to cope. He came down and said to Martin, well, that was really lucky, I nearly turned around again. And Mark was like, oh God, I'm a bit nervous as well, because they haven't worked together for ages.
It was weird because at that time I was writing a lot more at home here in New York. I had all these kind of songs that I demoed. I was dying to sort of say, you know, I got some songs, you know, but it just wasn't the moment, you know.
You've been hanging from a rope of mediocrity, strung up by your insecurities.
We fulfilled our brief, really. All the songs were there, you know, David voiced a lot of them. It was still a bunch of really good demos, though. It needed to be lifted to the next stage.
It's not sometimes the best way to do it, because once you get to that stage, half done or whatever, you know, it's very hard to suddenly change the direction.
Even though the demos were a lot more developed than they usually are, the band as a whole still felt that they needed to be made into something a bit more special, and Mark's name was mentioned.
And I actually just bought the Bjork album, which Mark had done, and I just loved his production. So I just said, Mark, listen to that. That's the kind of guy you should be working with.
We met up with him and he seemed like a really nice person, so we decided to carry on, and Gareth also stayed on the project as an engineer.
I mean, we'd known Mark anyway from his days of LFO, and he'd had experience producing Björk. There are very few people who understand electronic music and understand songs and understand other instrumentation as well when required. You know, a lot of people are very good at electronic music but don't really understand songs or how to make the songs work.
With Tim and Mark, we kind of felt that we needed somebody that was going to be like that fourth member that we were missing.
One of the interesting things we did with Exciter is move out of the control room. Instead of the band moving into the control room, we worked in a number of studios with quite large live rooms, playing areas, whatever you want to call them.
They kind of wanted to keep the feeling of they were still in a home studio, because Martin had done all the demos in his home studio. So they'd rent the studio, but instead of working in the control room, wherever basically it's a big mixing desk and basically one thing can happen at a time, they sort of set up in a kind of modular form in the live room.
I physically wanted to get out of the control room. I found it not an empowering environment.
There was lots of different things going on at the same time, so it was quite informal the way they were working it. But obviously, you know, to a very high standard, because they were using really good kit and Gareth's a great engineer.
It seemed like a long process up until that point of mixing, and we needed somebody that was going to be able to close the door.
I know when I did the first one, they were quite surprised that I'd finished it, because they were used to taking quite a long time.
Traditionally, when we'd mixed albums, we just used to take tons of time. Master and Servant was 2 weeks, you know, for one mix. And we just couldn't believe it how Steve would get the mix together in a day.
There were times when he was in the mixing studio with nothing to do, waiting for us to finish the recording.
And Fletch actually said he was going to buy me a prize for like the quickest ever Depeche Mode mix. The band were quite happy with the way the record was sounding and the way it was going. Because sometimes when I'm brought in to mix records, it's a total shambles. But they were very happy with, you know, what was there, and each song was very specific about what they wanted. I think by the end of January we had to finish, but it was quite generous the time we had. I think by the time we got to London, they'd still a few tracks to record, but it was more or less all finished. I think there was only 2 or 3 songs to mix in London. Free Love still being one of them that they were still. Fletch still going on about wanting backing vocals. And Martin finally did the backing vocals at about 2 o'clock in the morning, quite drunk on the last night.
If you said 39, I can understand what you're thinking of. I can see the pain that you're frightened of. And I'm only
I saw it as an okay album track, but virtually everybody in the studio suddenly said, "Oh, this is a single," and I was saying, "No, I don't think it is, you know, because it could easily have gone really pop." So it took us a while to get that to work and free it from its pop shackles.
It's just free love, no hidden catch, no strings attached. And just free love, no hidden catch, no strings attached. Just free love. Hey girl, you've got to take this moment.
That was really the first time I really felt that Martin felt he was involved with the album sleeve, because he did really want a much more positive image on the cover.
I just felt that we'd had so many black album covers and that it would be nice to actually get a bit of colour in there.
And Anton felt it should be very phallic, and I kind of turned my nose up against and just thought it was too obvious, especially with the title Exciter, big freaking dildo on the sleeve or something, or whatever it was. Actually, it wasn't his idea, but that's what came into my mind.
So it just came about when we were doing photographs of the band actually in Santa Barbara, and I saw this cacti.
These cacti were everywhere, and we sort of collectively came up with the idea of shooting a cactus overhead shot, and that would kind of be quite phallic.
You could see it's sexual, but it's also a nice image, just not very deep, but it's a nice image.
The look of the album, the colors that were used, then the videos that were not directed by Anton and that were in such different styles.
I think we were being told that MTV, VH1 were just getting bored seeing a video turn up on their desk. The new Depeche Mode video by Anton Corbijn.
I liked the videos that came out of it, but they didn't have the feel of the Anton videos because Anton's visual world is so timeless.
There was talk about who's going to do the video for Dream On. I said, well, is Anton not going to do it? No, we definitely want to do something a bit different.
Start of a new album is always the worst moment as a video maker, because if you've been working with a band up to that point, the new album signifies a new thing for that band. So if they're going to make any changes, they're most likely to make it there. And they decided to try something new.
As your bony fingers close around me, long and spindly death becomes me. Heaven, can you see what I see?
Dream On was the perfect introduction for an album like this. It was perfect to let them people know about the direction. It has always been like this. I feel you was presenting a kind of rock album or something very powerful. Barrel of a Gun was presenting a massive sound, as well as Dream On was presenting the intimate or the delicate side of the Depeche Mode music.
That's why we made that the first single, I think, because it sounded so different from anything else that they'd done and anything else that was around.
It was almost 70s sounding to me, in some sort of odd way, with the harmonies and stuff. It was like a little bit like Crosby, Stills and Nash or something. But so I think it's just always good for us to release something that's different, especially as a first single from each album.
Feel the fever coming, you're shaking and twitching. You can scratch all over, but that won't stop you itching. Can you feel a little love? Can you feel a little love? Dream on, dream on.
Again, we're struggling at this point. The singles do quite well, and the albums were still selling well, but we just weren't getting that hit single, and that's what we were failing to do on these albums, really get the songs to radio.
I know we had quite a few visitations from the American, because they're on reprise in America, and because we're in New York, we had quite a few of them coming down. and we played them, and they all thought Dream On until they had I Feel Loved, and then there was a bit of debate about that. Martin was like, oh, don't play them I Feel Loved, because I think he thought they'd definitely want that for first single, and he didn't want that.
It's a dark night of my soul.
I Feel Loved was like the most obvious single they'd on there, really. And we had a Danny Tenaglia mix of that, which was a huge club track.
I Feel Loved was the classic Depeche Mode dance song. It works very well. It works very well the video Johnny Hillcoat too.
As the darkness closes in my head I hear whispering.
Depeche Mode, from pretty much the turn of the century, from 2000 on, with the Exciter record, really began to get the attention that they deserve. Plus, there'd been a turnover in music critics. You get a generational turnover in music critics, people who'd actually grown up listening to Speak and Spell and Construction Time again, and who love those records, are now writing reviews for magazines.
And it was for the first time that I got this notion that for some reason Depeche Mode now started to be everybody's darling, even critically. You know, everyone, just from teeny magazines to techno magazines, started singing the song of how great the Exciter album was.
So many journalists that write, brand new journalists saying, hey, you know that Exciter is fantastic because of the electronic, all of this kind of new electronic generation. I really start to love and to have real respect to Depeche Mode after Exciter instead of after Ultra, even that is, very small difference between a reaction.
From the depths of my emptiness comes a feeling of inner bliss. I feel wanted, I feel desired. I can feel my soul on fire. I feel loved. I feel loved.
They were more settled into their new structure, their new routine, and Dave was incredibly healthy around Exciter. He was much more confident in his new skin. And because with Exciter, they decided they were strong enough to release a studio album and a tour on the back of it, we thought it was, the timing was fine.
I think, having not done some of the videos, I think they realised that the relationship was very, very good with Anton. So they asked him to do One Night in Paris, which was great.
Whenever you're recording or filming, there is always a little bit of added pressure. It's not necessarily seeing the cameraman there, it's just knowing that it's happening.
Obviously, if you're concentrating more on getting what you're playing right, you're not going to be as animated. And Dave's obviously trying his best to concentrate that his voice sounds good.
They're very hard live films. They're not just a piece of cake, because for the band, they are trying to play to an audience. And for a film crew, you actually want the band to play to the film crew. So there's a little bit of tension. There always is a tension like that in any live film.
There's always a lot of tension. For me, I think Dave gets it quite a bit as well.
Terrified, yeah.
And does it disappear?
It doesn't really disappear. It does, I guess, dissipate, but I don't know what point it does that.
It takes me quite a few songs to relax and get into it. But then most nights I do really enjoy the actual performance.
There's a slight element of nerves, but sort of an adrenaline buzz as well. So it's you just, especially the tour has been so good and the concert's been so good. There's a sort of buzziness about you that you're anxious to get on because you know that the concert's going to be fantastic. We're sounding and performing better, I think, than we've ever done in our career. I think we're able to do things differently very easily.
Alan was a very important part of our band before he left, but I think in some ways it's challenged us and made us do things differently.
And now with Peter Gordino and Christian Eigner actually playing these instruments with us, like Christian on drums and everything, we're a different band.
There was nothing better than going on this tour for me, and I really enjoyed it. It was crazy, but it was a great tour.
What we did start doing a lot more is that, like, whereas Martin and I used to just do Somebody, for instance, like on the first tour, on the singles tour, then all of a sudden we got to a point where we were just changing songs every night. Sometimes just learning them like half an hour before we went on, which was quite good fun, playing a song that you've only known for half an hour in front of 20,000 people.
There's a few things I never change because they're like key things and like cues that other people get on stage to know where we are. So I don't change that, but there's a lot of little things I change every night still, because that would be the only way to still enjoy it.
As I said, I haven't toured much, but I've never sort of formed the bonds with any other band or artist that I have with Depeche Mode.
We always say we don't wish it to our worst enemy to be opening for Depeche Mode, because sometimes other labels approach us, oh, can't you put in a good word to management that we can open for Depeche Mode? And we say well, we can do, but we don't wish this grief on you.
I heard that Frank was playing again as Fred Gadget and playing all the old hits and had a new band, and I think I suggested it to the other members of the band, and Daniel ran it by them. I thought it would be just really nice to go full circle, because obviously we were discovered supporting Fad.
He was suggesting, and we really love Frank to death, so we said yes.
And he went down really well with the fans. And this is where it really paid off that the band has such devoted fans, because of course everyone knew who Fat Gadget was. They knew what the status of Fat Gadget was in Depeche Mode's career, and they welcomed Fat Gadget with a lot of respect, I thought.
Love parasite. Love parasite.
Our normal support bands used to always get coined off.
Love parasite.
So we warned Frank about that before the tour, and he built these special Perspex shields and helmets, and they stopped using them after the first or second show because they realised that they weren't getting coined at all.
Gonna get dusty tonight. Listen to that noise, it's a hungry voice.
I was hardly aware of them at all, but, he's quite a character. Very entertaining. Yeah, really good.
This was a shame, really, with his death, because he was really back into music again, because he'd gone through a period of thinking he couldn't contribute anything anymore. And he sort of really got it all back with this young band, and then he unfortunately died.
Okay, break it down!
It was exactly 8 weeks in America and exactly 8 weeks in Europe. It was almost like the band had agreed to a tour and then made a point of saying, we're going to do these amount of weeks and that's it, no more, because we're just not sure how it's going to be on the road. Luckily, it all went very, very smoothly.
Dream on, dream on.
When the show was starting, I stood in the pit taking photos, and I could just feel this enormous love that comes across from the audience. I think it's so reciprocal for the band because I could just see them indulging in all this energy that comes from their audience and giving this back and gathering energy from it, and playing fantastic shows.
Dream on, dream on.
Depeche fans know more about Depeche than me. If there was a university challenge type thing, me and Martin and Dave against 3 fans, they would win easily.
They come from all over the world, from different cultures and backgrounds, but I do think they're intelligent and I think they're quite critical, and I think they don't just take everything that Depeche Mode do in an uncritical way. So I think we're always very conscious of that, and I think that's why we try and push ourselves every time to make a record that is challenging for the fans. I don't think the fans want to hear the same thing over and over again. They want to hear new ideas and new things.
I don't think it's good for us to just, do what comes naturally to us and follow a formula. I think it's always good if somebody is pushing us in different directions or showing us different ways to work.
At the start, I don't think Martin was interested in selling records, because this was supposed to be an experimental album which went askew somewhere down the line. I think he wanted to look at it sideways and go, okay, let's make something that's not so Depeche, which I think we did, really. It was not really, a classic Depeche album, is it? There's no big, huge anthemic choruses.
I think the important thing about Exciter is that it was made. If Ultra was the album that kind of stopped the ship from sinking, this is the one that kind of got them back on course.
At the end of Exciter, there was a very positive spirit, yeah. I remember Fletch being extremely pleased with the result.
I think that atmosphere has been gradually coming on since Ultra, really. It's been building, and thankfully, touch wood, it's a real good feel at the moment.
Brought them together, I think, Exciter. And I think they realised that, wait a minute, we're quite good, aren't we? I think this is it now. I think they're going to go on.
heavenly oversized, eating from silver spoons. Hey! We are the dead of night. We're in the zombie room with twilight's parasite, with self-inflicted wounds. We are the dead of night. We're in the zombie room, heavenly oversight, eating from silver spoons. We are the dead of night.